Avery, you suck!
Here we go, here we go, here we go!
You don't have a dental plan at work?
Oh,
you suck!
Avery goes to the front of the goal. Gomez, Yager has time. He shoots one wide of Brodeur. Avery, settle it down. He takes a hit. Gomez on the outskirts. After the point man, it's Yager. Scotty Gomez in the ring. Yager again, walking. Shooting one wide of Brodeur. Played this way by Gomez. Scott Gomez turns. Thinks about it. One-timer. Oh, it's blocked in front. Shanahan let it fly. Gomez is flying. He sets up Yager. Yager for Gomez, holding on to it out in front. They score! The guy you talked about, Sean Avery. Power play goal.
Darting back in is Avery again. Avery able to shake by White, a shot save, and he ran into Brodeur. His helmet is off. Brodeur shuts back, and then Avery shuts back, and a crowd gathers.
Players will step over the line, sometimes deliberately just to try and push the other team to get an edge.
Hockey is a sport steeped in tradition, where the older and younger generations sometimes clash over the so-called unwritten rules that have long shaped the game. These differing perspectives create a divide that seems unlikely to ever fully close, as each generation brings its own interpretation of what hockey should be. Enter Sean Avery, a player who never shied away from challenging the status quo. In a world where unwritten rules supposedly govern the ice, Avery was the guy who constantly questioned them, stirring the pot in a way that few others dared. Avery once said, "In the world of hockey where unwritten rules govern the ice, few people seem to agree on what they truly are. And those who think they know, feel they should be able to tell everyone what that way is. Like how hard you can hit somebody, who you can hit, depending on what the score is, etc." Love him or hate him, you can't deny he had a knack for making some pretty compelling points. But Avery didn't necessarily reject the so-called code, he created his own. Avery understood that getting under an opponent's skin wasn't just a tactic, it was an art form. If he could throw the other team off their game, make them lose focus, he was doing his job and doing it well. For Avery, it was far more effective to be the agitator, the guy everyone else had to chase, rather than the one playing by the traditional rules. So where did Sean Avery come from? Who is he? And how did he become so infamous that he forced the NHL to create its own rule named after him? Well, boys, this is the story of Sean Avery.
Come and grab me! That's gutless on your part! You can't handle me, George. Who?
Okay, here.
Me?
Go.
Oh, you got my number already. The puck was loose.
No, it's not. Go.
It is so. It's right there.
We got to get him to tone down a few things, but he's young and he'll learn.
Sean Christopher Avery was born April 10th, 1980 in North York, Ontario, to Alan and Marlene Avery, who were both school teachers. Sean would grow up in Pickering, Ontario, attending Dunbarton High School alongside his younger brother Scott. Sean Avery always loved hockey growing up, but he was a smaller kid. As his peers would get bigger, hockey would get harder for Sean, so Avery had to get smarter, finding other ways to be a more effective hockey player despite his size disadvantage, with the hope that once he finally hit a growth spurt, he'd be doubly effective. However, that day never really came, forcing Avery to continue to just do things his way, and his way would be forming his own ideal model for success growing up that was built on three key elements. The elements being to identify the other team's best player, their enforcer, and their agitator. Once he pinpointed who was who, he would then systematically target each one in different ways. For the best player, Avery would usually deliver a cheap shot or do something to get under their skin, knowing it would have to spark some sort of retaliation and disrupt team focus. When it came to the enforcer, Avery would often try to slash, spear, or agitate them enough to provoke a fight, only to stand there innocently when they dropped their gloves, a tactic that made him all the more despised. As for identifying the agitator, this would be Avery's strong suit. Avery was more skilled than the average agitator, so he would often rack up points on the power play, then return to the bench and remind the other team's agitators why they were stuck in their roles while he was making a difference on the ice and making more money. After terrorizing the GTHL, Sean would own these tactics, playing for Owen Sound and Kingston in the OHL, where he honestly had a solid junior hockey career as a strong power forward on the left wing. Despite his lack of size, it seemed Avery proved he could be a very effective player and could make that next step. However, when Sean's draft year would come around in 1998, he would never get that call on draft day, leaving him as an undrafted free agent. After a very successful 1999 season, which saw Avery put up 36 goals and 84 points in 66 games split between Owen Sound and Kingston, one team was willing to take a chance on the small but skilled agitator. The Detroit Red Wings would sign Sean Avery as a free agent during the 1999 offseason. Avery would spend one more year in the OHL, where he would match his point total from the previous season in 11 less games, and follow that up with a solid 2001 season spent in the AHL. Now in 2002, heading into Sean Avery's rookie camp, his intensity and relentless desire to win were on full display. In one exhibition game that rookie camp, he would intentionally run Boston's goalie Andrew Raycroft, starting a line brawl against the Bruins rookies. But this was all part of Avery's calculated plan to just get noticed. He wanted the Red Wings to see the edge he could bring to the team, to prove that he was a valuable asset they couldn't overlook. And to his credit, it worked. Even more impressively, Avery's work ethic was always something he took great pride in, something even many star players blessed with natural talent often lack. Determined to compensate for his size disadvantage, Avery always pushed himself relentlessly in the gym, finding ways to make up for what he lacked in his stature. So by the time Red Wings main camp came around, he was ready. The undrafted 21-year-old Avery would approach the team's inter-squad game with the intensity of a Game 7 in the Stanley Cup final. In Avery's mind, making the Red Wings roster was a matter of life and death. Hockey was all he knew and all he ever wanted. Determined to prove himself, Avery stuck to what he did best, targeting a player who embodied the style of play he admired. His target was Darren McCarty, a Red Wings enforcer whose hard-nosed approach Avery sought to emulate. Avery made sure to go out of his way to deliver a hit on McCarty, making sure it packed as much force as possible. Though McCarty didn't even go down, he would certainly take notice. Avery was sending a clear message to the Red Wings. He could play with anyone and would do whatever it took to make that known, regardless of the consequences. This was a really ballsy move by the young rookie, and realistically there could have been a lot of consequences for this, and he must have caught Darren McCarty on a good day. Though the two never fought, McCarty confronted the rookie, offering a warning in the form of some rookie duties. McCarty would have Avery filling up his water bottles and even going out to start his car on occasions. After training camp, despite his best efforts, Sean Avery was unfortunately sent back to the Cincinnati Mighty Ducks of the AHL. However, as he was being reassigned, Ken Holland reassured Avery that his time in Detroit wasn't over, and urged him to stay ready. Avery's time in the minors was like a college experience, training and working hard by day and enjoying the nightlife by evening. Yet despite his active social life, Avery was disciplined. He knew how to balance work and play, never allowing distractions to derail his ambitions. Unlike some teammates he recalled playing with who had the skill, but grew complacent and were totally okay with having cushy careers in the AHL, while Avery remained focused, always striving for more. Although Avery didn't particularly enjoy his time in the AHL, he did find a silver lining, being coached by Mike Babcock. And no, that wasn't a joke. Despite one weird incident Avery revealed during a Spit and Chicklets interview, where Babcock allegedly accused Avery of slashing his tires.
But you also played for Babcock in the AHL, so you must have a couple different stories.
Yeah, Babs, dude, man, he called me into his office and one day and was like, did you slash my tires? I was like, I had to think to myself for a second, did I fucking slash his tires last night? No, God, no, I didn't slash your tires. Or it was just his way of like, getting into my head and getting me under control. So that was a different time.
Yeah, according to Avery, this was one of the few highlights he had while playing in the AHL. While opinions on Babcock's coaching style vary, it's clear that Avery responded well to his methods. After Avery received the mid-season call-up, he believed there was no turning back. He made his NHL debut on December 19, 2001. Fully aware that staying focused and composed was essential. A few weeks later, Avery intended on making his mark. In a game where the Red Wings were trailing the Vancouver Canucks 3-0 early, Scotty Bowman, the legendary head coach, gave Avery the nod, trusting him to shake things up. Avery knew exactly what he had to do. He targeted Vancouver's star player, Trevor Linden, to get the Vancouver Canucks' attention and help the Red Wings get back into the game. Avery wouldn't hold back, delivering a few hits on Linden and even goading the legendary Canuck into a fight. How often do you see a young rookie run around and try and chase a well-respected leader, like a Crosby or a McDavid, and actually goad them into a fight? Not often. This moment showcased Avery's knack for getting under the skin of his opponents. Even a guy like Trevor Linden, who I'm sure by that point in his career had seen it all, couldn't help but to fall for Avery's tricks. The Red Wings ultimately came back to win the game, and in that instance, Avery knew exactly what his role was going to be. While he might not have been the one scoring goals, Avery's contributions on the third line and the little things he did that didn't show up on the score sheet made him a valuable player night after night. Despite a promising start, Avery's tenure with Detroit was mostly spent in the AHL. With the return of injured Red Wings player Igor Larionov, Avery found himself without a spot on the roster and was reassigned to the AHL Cincinnati. This demotion was a significant blow for Avery, who had vowed never to return to the minors. Throughout the 2002 season, Avery bounced between the AHL and NHL. However, on March 2nd, 2002, in a game against the Pittsburgh Penguins, Avery achieved a milestone by scoring his first NHL goal. Over his career, Avery gained a pretty bad rep for being all bark and no bite when it came to actually fighting, but Avery never tried to be a great fighter. Fighting was a matter of technique to Sean. He likened his approach to fighting to that of Floyd Mayweather, not in skill but in strategy. Just as Mayweather fought to minimize damage, Avery would aim to do the same. He decided early on in his career that he wouldn't just endure beatings and take punches. Instead, he believed in striking first, hitting hard, and avoiding fights he couldn't win. He took to heart the advice once given to him by the legendary Scotty Bowman. Never fight when you're ahead, and Sean followed this principle almost religiously. And like I said, Avery was known for picking fights he knew he could win, but sometimes he would definitely bite off more than he could chew. Following the first goal milestone, Sean thought it would be a good idea to take a run at Bob Probert, and even land a punch on Probert while he was down. Now, I was unable to find any footage of this, but according to Sean, after hitting Probert to the ice, with so many bodies between the two, Probert couldn't retaliate properly. After the ensuing scrum, it was obvious that Avery had poked the bear, and you don't poke the bear. Probert would skate by the Red Wings bench and warn his old team that he would kill their new teammate if they put him back out on the ice. Avery admitted that this was the only time in his career he'd ever genuinely feared hitting the ice. Fortunately for him, Scotty Bowman, wanting to avoid any potential accessory to murder charges, kept Avery off the ice for the rest of the game. As the 2002 season neared its end and the playoffs started to approach, Avery would unfortunately have to miss the entire 2002 Stanley Cup playoff run for Detroit due to a leg injury sustained in practice. Despite practicing for 2 more days, Avery was ultimately sidelined with a broken leg. A really tough blow given Detroit's eventual Stanley Cup success. However, Avery would embrace his role as a black ace during the playoff run, and he now had a taste of the big time, and it only fueled his hunger for more. Shortly after the 2003 season began, Avery, much to his surprise, was sent down once again, but he wouldn't receive a call back up in Detroit. But instead, he would be traded to the Los Angeles Kings. In LA, Avery struggled to adapt, finding the team culture to be quite strange, even went as far as to call head coach Andy Murray an alien impersonating a human. In LA, Avery began to establish himself as a full-time NHLer, but he also gained a reputation as a problematic teammate. Rumors came out around this time that Avery had been bullying teammate Dustin Brown, a rumor Avery has always said was totally made up by the media. Avery stated that he never disliked any of his teammates, but he would push them to do better. Unlike most players who let the coaches manage the dressing room, Avery would call out teammates who weren't pulling their weight and expected others to do the same for him. Although he claimed this never happened because he was always doing his part. Avery also said he never bullied Dustin Brown. He would just give him genuine heart-to-heart advice about being a young guy jumping into an early marriage with his high school sweetheart. In 2003 now, Sean Avery started to begin making plenty of enemies around the league. His rivalry with Scotty Hartnell began around this time as well. During a game against Nashville, when Hartnell was with the Predators, Avery, after putting the Kings ahead with a goal, threw a contentious hit on Hartnell, where Avery accused Hartnell of turning his back at the last second to make the hit look worse than it was. Avery was ejected from the game, prompting him to vow retribution against Hartnell. So from the next season on, Avery took advantage of Hartnell's personal struggles. Knowing Hartnell went through an ugly divorce, over their careers, Avery would taunt Hartnell relentlessly, asking him how it felt to be the only young pro athlete in the prime of his career to still get dumped by his wife. Avery was a master of mind games and psychological warfare, and his expert use of trash talk was a hallmark of his style. Avery would also see himself as a ladies' man, and had a fair share of girlfriends throughout his career. He dated Rachel Hunter before Jarrett Stoll did, and Sean was never afraid to ask for an update on Rachel when the two would face off. In a 2003 game against the Rangers, Sean Avery couldn't resist taking endless jabs at Eric Lindros. He taunted Lindros with typical low blows. Avery said he could never deliver, referring to him as Bonnie, a nod to Lindros' mother, who was notoriously involved in his career. Avery's chirps also included comments about how Lindros would never win, and that failure would define his legacy. Moms, girlfriends, wives, your distant third cousin, nothing was off limits to Avery. This guy Avery would seemingly know every aspect of his opponent's personal life. Shortly after Avery started to make a name for himself around the league, he decided to perfect the character he had crafted on the ice and bring it off the rink. Ahead of a game against the Toronto Maple Leafs, arguably the most popular team in the NHL, Avery made it clear to the Maple Leafs media that he never wanted to play for them. He explained, "In Toronto, you can never live a normal life. In LA, you can go out, grab a drink, and not get asked about hockey a million times." And just to stir the pot even more, he would also call all French players soft, and was later forced to apologize. And to just add a cherry on top, he would also confront Don Cherry to his face, telling him directly that the players Cherry criticized felt he knew nothing about the game. For Avery, all of this drama just made the game that much more enjoyable. He thrived on the attention, whether it be positive or negative. He definitely excelled at disrupting the opponent's focus. Despite playing the role of an absolute clown on the ice, he was a different person off of it, much like an actor who steps out of character once the camera stops rolling. Avery's skill in maintaining this duality wasn't surprising at all when he transitioned to an acting career after hockey. He knew how to switch off his intense on-ice persona when the game was over. The next season in 2004, Sean Avery would solidify his place as an NHL regular, notching 9 goals and 28 points in 76 games while accumulating 261 penalty minutes. In 2005, of course, the NHL would get hit with its infamous season-long lockout. During the 2005 season, like many players, Avery would take his talents over to Europe, signing with the Lahti Pelicans for the remainder of the season, which was just 3 games long. He would then finish out the 2005 season with the Motor City Mechanics of the UHL. When the NHL resumed play, Avery quickly found himself in trouble. At the start of the 2006 season, he was fined $1,000 for a dive, a call he strongly contested, feeling that he was being unfairly targeted by the league. Sure, bud. In the midst of the 2006 NHL season, Sean Avery's life would take an unexpected turn. The brash forward began dating Canadian actress Alicia Cuthbert. The two wouldn't be together for very long, but this relationship will definitely become a big part of Avery's story later. On the ice, Sean Avery had one of his most impactful seasons yet. He tallied 15 goals for the first time in his career and amassed 257 penalty minutes over 75 games. Despite his efforts, the Kings were struggling, but they were still within striking distance of a playoff spot. As the season neared its final stretch, head coach Andy Murray decided to introduce a new motivational strategy. On March 24, 2006, Murray would replace the traditional pregame drills for their upcoming game versus Nashville in favor of push-up routines routines. Yeah, he believed that this physical challenge would somehow inspire his team and rally them for the crucial games ahead. Rather than focusing on refining plays or strategizing, Murray's plan was to have the Kings players perform push-ups during practice, hoping it would send a powerful message about commitment and effort. Well, the message clearly inspired Sean Avery ahead of their game against Nashville, and he clearly had the power of push-ups.
Shoots and a save. Avery again. Score! He banked it off the goaltender. Avery gets the goal. He's doing some push-ups in the corner.
To the average viewer, Sean Avery's celebration might have seemed like an offbeat gesture, but for the Kings players and Avery himself, it was a way of mocking head coach Andy Murray, and the funny belief he had that doing push-ups would somehow be more effective than doing team drills before a game. The very next day, Coach Andy Murray was dismissed from his position as head coach, a move that likely pleased Avery. However, Avery's triumph was short-lived. He was benched for the final 3 games of the season after allegedly refusing to participate in a drill during practice, an accusation made by new interim head coach Mark Hardy, an accusation Avery vehemently denies. From his perspective, Coach Mark Hardy appeared to be positioning him as the scapegoat. After a rough end to the 2006 season, Sean Avery just couldn't catch a break, and he wouldn't make the best first impression with new head coach Mark Crawford, accidentally hitting the newly hired head coach with a puck during their first practice together, and it didn't take long for Avery to realize that his time in LA was nearing its end. Avery was on the move once more, but this time he was headed to New York City, where he would have the chance to shine under the bright lights of the Big Apple. Upon joining the Rangers, Sean Avery swiftly made enemies within the division, most notably with Marty Brodeur, the goaltender for the New Jersey Devils. Their encounter would spark one of the most famous player versus goalie rivalries the sport has ever seen, and Avery learned from their first encounter that he could easily agitate the Hall of Fame goaltender, prompting Avery to delve into Brodeur's personal life, using his findings as psychological ammunition for when the time is right. In New York, Avery quickly endeared himself to the fans and proved to be invaluable for the Rangers. The 2007 season saw him play arguably the best hockey of his career. He recorded 20 points in the Rangers' final 28 games, finishing the season with 18 goals and 48 points, which helped propel the team into the playoffs. For the first time in his career, Sean Avery was going to experience what playoff hockey was like beyond just being a black ace. The Rangers would face the Atlanta Thrashers in the first round, and Avery took on the role of shadowing Ilya Kovalchuk throughout the series. His efforts were pivotal in a Rangers sweep, highlighted by a spectacular goal in Game 2. And I do mean spectacular. However, reality set in during the next round as the President's Trophy winning Buffalo Sabres eliminated the Rangers in 6 games. Despite this, Avery's postseason performance was commendable. He amassed 5 points in 10 games. And following the series, Coach Tom Renney praised Avery, stating, "I don't know if there's a tougher, more engaging guy in the game right now," underscoring Avery's impact on the ice. Following his standout performance with the Rangers, Sean Avery sought out a pay raise to reflect his solid play. So Avery did one of the dumbest things somebody seeking a pay raise can do. He leaked a copy of the Rangers' position, where New York was arguing that Avery only deserved a $200K pay raise. He would leak this info to Larry Brooks, a beat writer for the New York Post. This misstep only fueled fire in the hearing, where Avery was criticized hard and essentially told that the team's public statements about him were deceitful. Ultimately, Avery would have to settle with the Rangers' $200K raise offer, increasing his salary from $1.6 million to $1.8, but it's possible Avery worked himself out of some money by leaking that info. On the ice, Avery proved his worth, tallying 15 goals and 33 points in 56 games for New York, validating his pay raise and reaffirming his role as an important part of the team. And had he managed to stay healthy for an entire season, Avery more than likely would have reached the 20 goal and 50 point marks for the first time in his career. However, Avery's 2008 season would take a weird turn when he was accused of having his phone number leaked by a hooker. In a defiant response, Avery told the media, "I promise you guys that if I ventured into one of these establishments, I would never use my own name." This claim would soon be debunked as it was revealed that the person accused of leaking Avery's number had no idea who he was. In 2008, Sean Avery would once again make some noise in the playoffs. The Rangers were set to clash with the New Jersey Devils in the first round, rekindling their storied rivalry. This matchup would also mark another chapter in the ongoing Marty Brodeur versus Sean Avery saga. Avery's notorious trash talk would now start to take aim at Brodor's personal life, accusing him of infidelity with his sister-in-law. Well, not really accused, because this actually happened. This was a real scandal that actually unfolded. Brodor's personal life had indeed been a mess. He actually ended up leaving his wife for her sister. And once Avery heard about this through the NHL grapevine, it was over for Marty this series. This series quickly became a showcase for Avery's playoff prowess. After a solid performance in Game 1, which included a crucial goal, the Rangers were ahead. In Game 2, Avery sealed the victory with another clutch goal, highlighting his knack for performing under pressure. However, it was Game 3 at Madison Square Garden where Avery's antics reached unprecedented levels. During a crucial 5-on-3 power play for New York, Avery devised a tactic never before seen in nearly a century of NHL hockey. He parked himself directly in front of Brodor, but instead of staying put, he turned around to screen Marty face to face, while yelling, swearing, and flailing his arms in the air. Avery just cracked the code. He found a way to obstruct the goalie's view completely, without drawing a penalty. As the power play went on, the crowd started to erupt in a frenzy, as Avery's unorthodox approach left the refs bewildered. Despite warnings from the officials, Avery would continue his disruptive tactics, until he would score on the very same power play. The very next day, the NHL introduced a new rule that would forbid a player to stand directly in front of the goalkeeper and take any other steps that might restrict their field of view. Avoiding this new rule would result in a 2-minute penalty. This rule would be called the Avery Rule. Avery naturally took pride in having a rule named after him, as it forever enshrined his legacy as one of the most unconventional and controversial players in hockey history. The New York Rangers defeated the New Jersey Devils in 5 games, and during the traditional handshake line after the series, Marty Brodor would notably pull away from Sean Avery, prompting Avery to give one of the most classic soundbites in NHL history.
What do you think about that?
Well, everyone talks about how classy, unclassy I am, and Fatso there just forgot to shake my hand, I guess, so.
Unfortunately, the Rangers would fall to the Penguins in the Eastern Conference Final, losing in 6 games. Avery would contribute 7 points in 8 playoff games. Now a free agent, Avery was eager to secure a substantial pay raise once again. Despite having such a positive impact on the Rangers, I mean, look at the team record when Avery played in games since becoming a Ranger, and tell me this guy didn't make a difference. The Rangers would still once again lowball Avery with an offer. Avery, realizing that most pro athletes usually only get one shot to cash out as a free agent, decided to join his 4th NHL team despite never wanting to leave New York. Avery would sign a 4-year, $15.5 million deal with the Dallas Stars. This would turn out to be a major mistake for Avery, as he never really distanced himself from New York. Before signing, Avery was already disliked by Stars captain Brandon Morrow, who had issues with him even before their first meeting due to Avery's notorious behavior over the years. Avery also didn't get along well with Stars goalie Marty Turco, largely due to Turco's allegiance with fellow goaltender Martin Brodeur. The only player Avery actually connected with in Dallas was fellow agitator Steve Ott. The tension between Avery and the Stars first boiled over in a game against Boston, where Avery and Steve Ott turned the game into chaos, aka they just brought back the 80s with this game. Both players racked up 20 minutes in penalties and created an all-out spectacle. The Bruins timekeepers even tried to get them suspended by the NHL, reportedly claiming that they had never heard such offensive remarks from Avery and Ott. After the game, Stars captain Mike Modano even expressed his frustration, stating that the duo had turned the game into a circus and that he had no interest in playing in such chaotic matches with them. The situation for Avery would reach a boiling point on December 1st, 2008, when the Dallas Stars were set to face off against the Calgary Flames in Calgary. The media interest in this game was intense, largely due to the narrative being hyped up about Sean Avery versus Dion Phaneuf. Why is this? Why was there so much hype about Sean Avery versus Dion Phaneuf? Well, you know how I mentioned earlier Avery fancied himself as a ladies' man? Well, the buzz stemmed from Avery's ex-girlfriend of a year and a half, Alicia Cuthbert, having started a relationship with Dion Phaneuf. And if you're still watching the video, you can likely guess where this is heading. And Avery would respond by not just adding fuel to the fire, but by throwing the whole gasoline tank in. Avery never understood the media's fixation over this story, and he felt it was overblown. To heighten up all of the drama, Avery decided to up his game. Right before his pregame skate, he was immediately asked about FNUF, seizing the opportunity to give the media a story worth covering, and to gain a mental edge over his opponent, Avery made his now infamous sloppy seconds comments.
Hi everyone. I'm really happy to be back in Calgary. I love Canada. And I just wanted to comment on how it's become like a common thing in the NHL for guys to fall in love with my sloppy seconds. I don't know what that's about, but enjoy the game tonight.
Oh man, I don't know why, but this will never not be funny to me. And look at the little smile he gives the camera after. Avery was a master at getting a reaction out of people throughout his entire career. It didn't matter if it was positive or negative. Avery just wanted you to feel something every time he was in front of the camera. What Sean did was pure WWE heel behavior. He took the ultimate low blow at FNUF, as you'd expect, much like a heel in wrestling, and now Avery had more people eyeing the upcoming game than ever imagined. But the NHL and the Dallas Stars didn't see it as just promotion for the game. Avery's time in Dallas was effectively over after this incident. He immediately regretted his comments, but the damage was done. He now had to pack his things and go back to New York for an in-person hearing. In the following days, Avery's remarks became the talk of the hockey world. The NHL announced Avery would be suspended indefinitely by the league, marking for his first ever suspension. Surprisingly, this was the first and only suspension of Sean Avery's entire career. During Avery's in-person hearing for his suspension, he felt as though the NHL was presenting him with a montage of his past incidents as a way of terminating him. Avery, now starting to fear that he might be losing his job, decided to confront the NHL suits head-on, emotionally expressing his frustration and arguing that other players with troubled pasts had committed worse offenses without facing similar consequences. And Avery had a very good point here. The NHL has allowed convicted murderers to come home from prison and return playing in the NHL as if nothing ever happened. I'm looking at you, Mac T. And all Avery did was make a really dumb, borderline offensive joke. Ultimately, Avery would be handed a 6-game suspension and was required to spend 30 days in a Malibu rehab facility for anger issues and behavioral problems. After completing his rehab assignment, Sean Avery became laser focused on returning to a New York Rangers sweater. Despite literally being the same caliber player he was a month earlier, Avery was still seen as a controversial figure due to his unpleasant remarks. However, it's important to remember once again that he never broke any laws, and many felt he deserved another chance. The Stars essentially cut ties with him and kicked him off the team, leaving New York in a strong position to negotiate. With Avery's value diminished and Dallas eager to move on, the Rangers were able to bring Avery back at a lower cost than before, making it a win for him financially, since now he was earning more money with New York than he would have under his initial contract offer from them. And Dallas was now paying Avery more money to play against them than New York was paying him to play for them. This was kind of a W for Avery, and it started to feel like this was all just sort of some big master plan to end up back in New York. Well, things were a little different upon his return to New York. Although he had good rapport with Rangers management, teammates, and former coach Tom Brenne, the team dynamic would shift instantly when John Tortorella would take over as head coach. Tortorella, who was working as a color analyst for TSN during Avery's suspension for his sloppy seconds comment, had openly criticized Avery, calling him classless and a disgrace. The animosity between Avery and Tortorella was palpable. Despite Avery's solid performance, Tortorella played him for only about 7 minutes per game, reflecting the deep-seated friction between the two. Avery was willing to move past Tortorella's comments, realizing that perhaps they weren't so different after all, as Tortorella had criticized Avery in a manner strikingly similar to how Avery often sought out attention by calling out others or making headlines. Although their relationship never improved, Avery believed Tortorella had the potential to make him a better player. Avery capped off his tumultuous 2009 season with 12 points at the final 18 games for the Rangers. Although New York made the playoffs, Avery barely saw any ice time, as he was constantly benched throughout the series. This was because when he would actually make it into the series, coach John Tortorella publicly criticized him after Avery took 2 penalties in the 3rd period of Game 4, a game in which the Rangers actually won to take a 3-1 series lead against the Capitals. But Tortorella would then tell the media that Avery had crossed an emotional line and put the team in jeopardy, so he pretty much only saw the bench for the rest of the series. and ironically, Tortorella himself would later cross an emotional line the following game. Torts had a mental breakdown on the bench, spraying water at fans, throwing a bottle and hitting a woman in the stands, and after that, he had to be restrained by other coaches. The Rangers would then squander a 3-1 series lead against Washington, leaving them to wait for next season. As the 2010 NHL season approached, Avery felt his time in New York was dwindling. He sensed that coach John Tortorella was intent on pushing him out of town. Tortorella seemed determined to disrupt Avery's game, criticizing him for his fighting and agitating tactics, fearing they might provoke the opposing team and boost their motivation. Despite this, Avery still held out hope of winning Tortorella over. He also began to feel that the Rangers were looking to replace him, especially as the team signed players with similar styles such as Donald Brashear and Derek Boogaard. Sean Avery would become friends with the late Derek Boogaard and described Donald Brashear as one of the weirdest people he'd ever met. Avery recounted that Brashear had a severe case of halitosis, bad breath. It was so overpowering that whenever Brashear spoke, Avery would need a trainer with Vicks VapoRub on hand to mask the smell ASAP. Avery also shared a bizarre moment in the dressing room where Brashear was caught with his dog in the shower, showering the dog with an unusual level of affection and cleaning areas that most people would simply just let the water rinse. Ah man, I thought this hilarious, bizarre story from Avery's book was too good not to share with you boys. In 2010, Sean Avery played in 69 games for the Rangers, registering 31 points. Unfortunately, the Rangers fell just short of making the playoffs, missing out by a single point on the final day of the regular season to the Philadelphia Flyers. Avery's troubles with torts would just continue this season as well. A notable incident occurred when Avery scored against his good old friend Marty Brodeur and then taunted him, calling him a homewrecker, all the usual chirps he would hit Brodeur with. But when Avery returned to the bench, instead of being congratulated for scoring a goal, Tortorella intervened, telling Avery that as long as he was coaching, Brodeur was off limits and Avery was not to speak to him in that manner. Avery reached a breaking point and told Torts to fuck off. 2011 marked Sean Avery's final full season in the NHL. In 2011, Avery had a characteristically turbulent season. He made more headlines by sucker punching Ladislav Smid of the Oilers and continuing his role as a notorious agitator across the league. As the playoffs approached, Avery was once again benched and the Rangers faced elimination at the hands of the Capitals once again as well. During the 2011 offseason, Avery did something off the ice that really underscored his claim of playing a character on the rink. In May 2011, Avery became the first athlete in any of North America's 4 major sports leagues to take a public stance on same-sex marriage equality in New York City. He recorded a PSA in his New York Rangers gear to support marriage equality, stating committed couples should be able to marry the person they love. Join me in supporting marriage equality. I did this because I was raised to treat others the way I would like to be treated. Avery acknowledged that this principle wasn't always evident during his on-ice persona, but he maintained that he was always playing a character in those moments. In 2012, Sean Avery would arrive at training camp in peak condition, feeling better than he had in years. However, this season would begin with the Rangers starting overseas in Europe. And during an exhibition game against Frölunda, Avery delivered what many would call the Sean Avery experience. Avery would perform one last famous Sean Avery shit show, a performance that would effectively seal the fate of his NHL career. On the flight back home to New York, head coach John Tortorella informed Sean Avery that he would be sent down to the AHL. Avery ended up playing just 15 games in the NHL during the 2012 season before retiring at the end of the year. Over his decade-long career, he appeared in 558 games, scored 90 goals, and accumulated 157 assists for a total of 247 points, along with 1,533 penalty minutes. In the playoffs, Avery notched 15 points in 28 games, reflecting solid postseason performance. Avery announced his retirement in March of 2012, but he claims he never actually filled out the necessary paperwork to retire, so who knows, he might not technically be retired. Despite feeling he still had much to offer and believing he was still the best at what he did, Avery could not remain in New York, the only place he truly ever wanted to play if coach John Tortorella was still there. Sean Avery is often misunderstood. He thrived on attention, loved being flashy, and took great pride in his role as the NHL's biggest agitator. Upon retiring, Avery made a surprising vow to his wife. He would pursue a career as a Shakespearean actor on Broadway. No joke. He immersed himself in Shakespearean study, inspired by the bard's skillful 16th century style trash talk. Avery even joked about using Shakespearean insults like "thou art as fat as butter" on Marty Brodeur. To Avery, Shakespeare's world resonated with his own, as he had been playing an NHL character his whole career. In 2022, Sean Avery would tease a comeback with the ECHL's Orlando Solar Bears. But this felt like just a publicity stunt if we're being honest, and considering Avery never played in a game, it probably was. Understanding the short shelf life of a pro athlete, Avery leveraged his NHL connections and resources to carve out a successful second career for himself. He's now a bar owner, hosts his own podcast, and has made a name for himself as a semi-successful actor. Say whatever you want about Avery, he wants you to, but it's also worth giving him some credit. As abrasive as he could be, he played the role of the antagonist to perfection, and was a decent player. Perhaps he could have advanced further in his career if he hadn't been so focused on being the center of attention. It's only a fitting evolution for someone who thrived on being in the spotlight to transition into Hollywood. Avery's made cameos in Patriots Day and the biggest film of 2023, the hit Oppenheimer. After his NHL career ended, Avery's goal has still remained the same: to entertain and provoke emotions, whether it's love, hatred, or laughter. As a wise man once said, "All the world's a stage, all the men and women merely players. They all have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts." Thank you boys so much for making it all the way through. Like and subscribe if you're still here and would like to see more. Also, I highly recommend you check out Sean Avery's autobiography, Offside, as it helped me out a ton while making this video. The book is filled with wild hockey stories for days, stories I really can't share with you guys on YouTube. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you boys in the next one.